All city council members and city staff are participating from remote locations, and the meeting will continue as long as there's a quorum. Please allow one person to speak at a time. I will call on every member to make sure we've had an opportunity to ask questions. I will now ask our city clerk, Renteria, to start a roll call, please.
Mayor Guerrero.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Stremler.
Here.
Councillor Farmer.
Here.
Councillor Henry.
Here.
Councillor Restucci. Councillor Hicks.
Here.
Councillor Broersma.
I am here.
City Manager Casey.
Here.
City Clerk Renteria, I am here. Finance Director Alba.
Excused.
Fire Chief Anderson.
I'm here.
Police Chief Escalera.
I'm here.
Public Works Director Fisher.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, we just have Councillor Restucci. I didn't hear from him.
Okay, Council, what do you want to do with Mr. Restucci's absence?
I'd move to
Mr.
excuse him.
Councilor, you're probably.
Okay, I got a motion.
Second.
Okay, got a motion to excuse Councilor Restucci from this meeting, and I got a second from Councilor Hicks, I believe, or was it Henry?
Yes, Henry.
Henry, thank you. So we got a first and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those opposed, no. Okay, hearing no no's, the ayes have it. Jackie, he is excused for tonight.
Okay, can I get a repeat on who made the motion, please?
The motion was Councilor Broersma, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, up next we have our executive session, which is RCW 42.30.110, parenthesis 1, parenthesis I, to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, or to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in official capacity is or is likely to become a party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. Possible action will be taken, and this might be to modify a previous resolution related to a real estate transaction. I will now ask our city clerk to please place all guests in the virtual waiting room during our executive session, which is going to be 30 minutes.
Okay, let me start moving everybody over, and I'll do your start time at 6:33. Is that fine?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I will let you know when everybody's out. One moment.
We could get started in the open session.
I'm having trouble with my audio listening to you guys, so I'm going to disconnect really quick.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I do have a copy of the previous motion.
Mr. Seaman, can you email that to me quickly?
I have a hard copy, sorry.
Testing.
I could hear you fine, Jackie.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Were you able to get that, Councilor Restucci, that, what you requested?
I'm getting it right now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, if not, I can send you the one I have.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir?
I would move to reconsider the motion previously made, the motion and action previously taken by council on December 26th to authorize the city manager to enter into a lease agreement with MLS Inc. and to further to authorize the city manager to negotiate, sign, and execute a lease in accordance with the terms and conditions specified by council.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, motion by Councilor Restucci, second by Deputy Mayor Broersma, and we'll have Jackie do roll call on this vote, please.
Counselor Henry,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Stremler,
Yes.
Counselor Farmer,
Yes.
Counselor Restucci,
Yes.
Counselor Broersma,
Yes.
Mayor Guerrero,
Yes.
Counselor Hicks.
Yes.
Mayor, you have 7 yes votes.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. The motion passes. So at this point, the motion was to reconsider our prior action to allow the city manager to enter a lease agreement negotiation with MLS. Do we do discussion at this point, Mr. Casey? Is that the process? And then put it to another vote?
Apologies, Mr. Mayor, trying to unmute myself there. I believe so. I might defer to Councilor Restucci if he has a little more familiarity with this particular step in the
Right.
process.
So council, what we've done is we voted to rehear the matter that we already took action on. It's called a motion to reconsider. It's in our council rules of procedure. It's allowed to be done only at the meeting that follows after the action, and only by somebody in the prevailing party. So by doing this, we've said that we want to basically redo this issue. So it's, you know, if you want to call it a mulligan, you can call it a mulligan. So this item is now again before the body. Now, Mr. Mayor, you need a motion and a second by a member of council to get it before the body so we can discuss it again.
Great, thank you for that clarification. That's definitely helpful. And council, what is your desire and allowing city manager to enter into an agreement with MLS for the lease of our business park here in Sunnyside? I think we either, if we don't hear any motion, I guess at that point the motion dies and nothing passes. So I'll wait another few seconds, see if anybody feels like they want to make this move forward.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be willing to make the motion, but I don't have it written out before me to be able to read it out.
Okay, I'll go ahead and just do the motion. I'll read it out, and that way we'll have that out ready. So do you want to go ahead and do that motion, Deputy Councilor Broersma?
Yes, we'll make the motion that you're about to read to us all.
Okay. Just gonna open the document. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So the motion that Councilor Borman is making is to approve resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into an intent to lease agreement with MLS Company, Inc., and further to authorize the city manager to negotiate, sign, and execute a lease in accordance with the terms and conditions specified by council. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Councilor, was it Henry or Hicks? I think I heard both on the same time.
Hicks can have it.
Okay, Councilor Hicks was the second. Okay, and at this point, is there any debate on this item? And we'll start with Councilor Hicks.
No questions. Comments.
Okay, Councilor Farmer,
None.
Councilor Restucci,
No questions or comments, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Broersma,
I have no questions or comments, sir.
Councilor Deputy Mayor Stremler,
No questions or comments.
Councilor Henry.
No, sir.
Okay, and I don't have any comments either. So at this point, we will ask the city clerk to do a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Henry,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Stremler,
Yes.
Counselor Farmer,
Yes.
Counselor Restucci,
No.
Counselor Broersma,
Yes.
Mayor Guerrero,
No.
Counselor Hicks,
No.
Okay, Mayor, you have 4 yes votes and 3 no votes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, that was not what I was expecting, but we are moving forward.
Mayor Guerrero?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, this is Eric, your city attorney. Did you want to clarify, because you can clarify, it seemed like there was maybe some confusion there. Did you want to clarify the original motion and make sure that folks understood what they were voting for?
Okay, I will definitely do that again because I was expecting a lot more no's because of what was said in executive session. So I'm thinking there might have been some confusion as far as what the guidance that we received was. So I just to clarify with council members, we were discussing this so that way the city manager can, in essence, terminate this option based on advice. And we have had 4 yes votes.
Yeah, Mayor, the motion was to approve
Right.
the resolution. So if
Right.
that's what folks want, that's certainly their right to do that. I just want to make sure everybody understood what the motion was. It was a motion to approve.
Right, which we did last time as well. On the original meeting tonight was a motion to reconsider this. So that is not what the outcome I personally expected. So council, is anybody who feels like they are okay with their vote, or does anybody want to change it?
I
This is
would like to
Deputy
change.
Mayor
I
Skelner.
thought we were making a motion to not approve, so I did vote that wrong. This
Okay.
is Councilor Henry.
So since we did an original motion, can we still modify that, Jackie? Is that the case, or do we have to start over again?
Well, Counselor Henry just made a motion to Did you say deny, Counselor Henry?
I didn't make the motion. I thought I was voting on the motion to deny, but apparently it was a to approve.
Okay, so
Counselor Henry was seeking, following clarification of the motion, Counselor Henry was stating that he had voted incorrectly and had intended to vote nay.
That is correct.
okay. Is there anybody else feels that they need to do any changes?
Mr. Mayor, my vote was to deny and to authorize, authorize the city manager to terminate the agreement. So I misunderstood what was where we were at. And so, yeah, I would be willing to change my vote on that one as well.
Okay, so just to clarify, and just to clean it up, but we'll have Jackie do roll call one more time. But right now, the motion before is to approve the city manager to enter into an agreement. And if you choose not to allow the city manager to enter into an agreement, then at that point, you're going to vote no. If you do feel like you want the city manager to continue the negotiations with the lease, then you want to vote yes. Okay, Jackie, can you please do a roll call one more time just to clarify everyone's desired outcome?
Yes, okay. Counselor Henry,
No.
Deputy Mayor Stremler,
No.
Counselor Farmer,
No.
Counselor Restucci,
No.
Counselor Boersma,
No.
Mayor Guerrero,
No.
Counselor Hicks.
No.
Okay, Mayor, you have 7 no votes.
Thank you, Jackie. So motion fails. So I'm sorry for the confusion. That's probably my part that I didn't specify that. So thank you for bearing with me, Council. Okay, Mr. City Manager, so you have that information. Okay, so it looks like that's the end of that agenda item. We'll move on to our next one, which is going to be.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Mayor? This is John Hodkinson.
Council, any objection? You're no objection? Okay, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we are here. Can somebody explain to me where we are, whether we're going to take a look at this one sentence or whether we're not?
Okay, we'll have the city manager reach out to you either later on today or tomorrow. And that way we could be more in-depth conversation than on an open council meeting.
Well, I guess I was just looking for a yes or no.
And you will get that with our city manager, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Okay.
All right, Mr. City Manager, do you want to let go of our city attorney? So do we still need him for additional agenda items?
Sorry. No, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The city attorneys do not need to be present for the budget update unless they wish to do so as private citizens out of their own interest. I can't imagine that would be very entertaining.
As tempting as that is, I think I'm going to call it a night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, we have our received the 2021 preliminary budget.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jackie has set it up, I believe, so that I can share my screen here in a moment. Just getting ready to have the slideshow ready. And let's see if that is working for everyone. Are the members able to see and the audience able to see the PowerPoint presentation, 2021 budget preliminary proposals? All right. So thank you very much, Council, and this is our second journey through a budget process. And this one's a little unusual in that I want to acknowledge both staff who were present and one individual in particular who could not be present during a portion of the budget development process. As council is aware, our finance director suffered an injury at the end of September that has kept her off work during the month of October. But I am very grateful for the foundation that she laid for our budget process, because it served us well in going forward, and then relying on the assistance of our finance supervisor, just realized I don't know if I actually said her name, Finance Director Elizabeth Alba, and then relying on the assistance of our finance supervisor, Delilah Sines, and our HR assistant, Victoria Hernandez, as well as help from the other members of the leadership team, the department heads. We were able to continue putting together a budget proposal for you for 2021. And this should, let me see if I can find the control here again. All right, next slide. So I want to acknowledge that hard work of the staff, both this summer and getting ready, and then this October as we move forward. So tonight I'll be going over some background information and some of the planning assumptions that we used in developing this budget proposal for you. I'll then spend some time going in some detail through the general fund, its revenues, and proposed expenditures, excuse me. And then kind of at a high level overview of our enterprise and restricted funds, again, going over revenues and expenditures. We'll summarize where we're at with regard to personnel. And then finally, I'll review with you information that you've seen before about the enhancement requests in the budget that council and department heads had put forward earlier in the budget process, some of which we were fortunate to be able to include based on your input and direction. All right, so I'll start by discussing a little bit the structure of the city's budget. As council is aware, the budget consists of many different funds, and each fund is supported by specific sources of revenue. Some of our funds historically have been healthier than others. Examples have been include the water fund or the sewer fund, but others have been weaker, and in particular the general fund. Even when some funds are healthy and others are weaker, audit and finance rules generally prohibit mixing them. In certain limited circumstances, a healthier fund can provide an interfund loan, what's called an interfund loan, to a weaker fund, but that weaker fund must pay back that loan and with interest. So it is an obligation that is incurred when we sometimes support a weaker fund with revenue from a stronger fund that can do so. Our largest single fund, with nearly 45% of city functions paid for from it, is what we call our general fund. Historically, it has been one of our weaker funds financially. In the general fund, we've had several years of concerns from state auditors as they've looked back, dating back, as far back as 2008, 2010, 2012. Over the last 10 years, multiple funds were either overspent or meaning they took in less revenue than they expended, or they exceeded their budget authority, meaning they had enough revenue, but the city spent more than was approved by council to be spent out of that fund. In the general fund in particular, the ending fund balance didn't reach a 60-day reserve target at all during the past 10 years. And that 60-day reserve target comes from the state auditor's office. They have set that as a financial benchmark for local governments as a prudent financial reserve. Given the size of our general fund, a 60-day reserve target, how much we would spend in 60 days, is roughly equal to about $1.9 million. And in the last 10 years, I think the best the city had achieved was about a 40-day reserve target. And in a few years, it was less than just 10 days. So that also has informed how we go about our budgeting. This year, a significant new factor for all of us has been the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. As council is aware, it's a global pandemic worldwide. There have been over 43 million cases. It's also had a global economic impact. It has disrupted supply chains and demand, which has resulted in a deep lingering recession in many nations and here as well. More specifically to our circumstance in Washington and how it affects our economy and potential revenues, employment has shrunk in Washington state 4% from 2019, which represents roughly 140,000 jobs. Job postings were down 24% from 2019. Retail sales overall are down about 10%. Taxable business income is down about 7%. And our export volume is down 23%, according to the State Department of Commerce. So we're seeing, not just in Sunnyside, but statewide, the ripples of these effects across supply and demand and revenue assumptions. Another key area that we look at is how are we able to kind of keep up with our financial discipline. City worked very hard, and with council's leadership, we ended 2019 with all of our funds under budget and in the black for the first time in over a decade. And we've kept those tight controls in place in 2020 as the pandemic hit. And you'll see later in the presentation how that has helped us get ready and be able to provide a balanced budget for the coming year. Another set of factors that we look at that affect how we budget is we're still seeing, at least in Sunnyside, some impacts even from the 2008, 2009 recession. Property values in Sunnyside remain historically low. The median housing value, according to the US Census, here is still under $130,000. That compares to nearly $170,000 countywide and over $300,000 statewide. So our property values are low. That means that our property tax revenue base is low compared to other communities. Our poverty rate, however, is high at 24.6%, according to the state, and that's 2.5 times the statewide rate. We are fortunate in one regard in budgeting across these areas, which is that the city has a fairly even mix of property, sales, and utility tax revenues. Some cities tend to rely more heavily on one or the other. As a result, when one becomes destabilized, it can destabilize their whole budget. We're fortunate that we have, we don't over rely on any one of these, and that you'll see later also helps us as we go forward. I'll also note that over the last 12 years or so, we've added about 15% more residents. We've had a pretty solid sustained population growth. And another factor that affects our ability to budget is inflation. Over the last 12 years, inflation has increased the cost of the goods and services that government buys, just like everyone else, by more than 21% in the United States, 25% in Washington. Now in Eastern Washington, it's not quite as steep as on the west side. So we're probably somewhere in that 21 to 25% range, but that erodes purchasing power in a budget. Some additional factors that we consider in putting together a budget is previous council guidance. In 2019, council adopted, at the urging of the state auditor's office, a plan to achieve a stable fund balance in the general fund by methodically setting aside an additional $250,000 each year towards our ending fund balance. And under that plan, the 2021 target would be $1 million. Candidly, we had some concerns about being able to stay on track with that plan, given what we were seeing with revenues earlier this year and the impacts from the pandemic. That was going to be a significant, potentially a significant effect on our revenues. The other guidance that we've heard very clearly from council is, to offer you a budget that balances without you having to do general tax increases, things like raising your utility taxes or sales taxes. The only tax increase that council has approved is the 1% ad valorem increase in property tax collections, which was projected to add about $23,000 in revenues in the coming year. After working through all of that, after looking at our revenue projections, and looking at, with department heads, our spending plans for the upcoming year, with a little creative effort here and there to make sure some things came in affordably, I am very pleased to report that what you have before you tonight is a balanced budget proposal with no general tax increases that does in fact set aside $1 million in an ending fund reserve and sustains our current levels of services with no staff layoffs. So this is kind of tiny print, and I apologize for that, but this is the overall slide that provides the budget summary by fund. As council's aware, for the last few years, council budgets essentially at the fund level. And so we present this to you to show both 2020 revenues, expenditures, and the proposed difference, as well as 2021. These 2020 figures represent information through your third budget amendment. Council has kept on top of changes to the budget as we've had to go through this year and make adjustments because of the COVID pandemic or because of CARES grant, CARES Coronavirus Relief Fund information. And so this reflects our current budget as of the third budget amendment. As you can see, all of the funds for 2020 remain on track and headed towards a positive ending fund balance. We do anticipate at least one further budget amendment before the end of the year to do some cleanup. Again, some of it COVID related, but we're pleased with the position we're at this point. In 2021, again, going through all of the funds, each ends in the black with a positive balance where revenues are where they're supposed to be, larger than expenses. In some funds, the differences are pretty minor, very modest, very thin margins, but every one of them does end up where we expect them to be. Some of them by design are intended to take in exactly the same revenue as they expend out. This is for things like some of our bond obligations and so forth. They're structured that way to have the same revenue as expenditure. So you will see some zeros there, but that's, as I said, again, by design. Overall budget across all funds is about a almost $33 million budget. That's a slight increase over this year's. And we'll go into some detail now. So this is a closer look at the general fund and the makeup of its revenues. In the general fund, our four taxes are kind of like the strongest legs of a four-legged stool. The revenues are based on our sales tax, our property tax, private utilities, such as telephone and electrical, and then the city's utilities tax for water and sewer and so forth. As a group, they make up approximately 70% of your budget. Almost all of these, three of these four taxes are actually capped in statute. So council has no latitude to raise them any further than is allowed by statute. At this time, our sales tax, our property tax, and our private utility taxes are all at their caps. The only one that doesn't have a cap is city utility taxes. But there's no, we are not proposing to raise any of those this year. I can break down for you kind of within that mix. Our sales tax will be the largest of the 4 in 2021. We're anticipating retail sales and use tax revenues just north of $3 million, which will be about 23% of our revenue, followed by the property taxes at about 2.4 million, and then private utilities at about 1.5 million, and city utilities at about 1.8 million in revenues. And that'll make up that full 9.2 million in revenues shown there. The next largest item in our general fund revenue is the beginning fund balance. And this is what we're carrying forward out of 2020 into 2021. This reflects council's direction that we strive for a strong ending fund balance this year. The target was at least $750,000. But as we've navigated the COVID-19 pandemic, we've put tight controls on our spending. You see that every 2 weeks at your council meetings with the invoices and the detailed spending. Right now, based off of both where we're projected to end with our current cash flow in the general fund, as well as the revenues coming in, we currently are projecting an overall beginning fund balance just a little north of 1.6 million. This actually is a little conservative based on what we're seeing in some stronger than expected sales tax so far year to date. This was one of the taxes we'd expected this year would really take a hit, and it's actually coming in pretty good. So we still kept this number a little conservative, but very pleased to be able to see that big beginning fund balance. The next largest revenue sources for us are the jail. The remaining slice here, or slices, I should say, which represent together about 20% of your revenue. These are the ones that were more vulnerable to effects from the pandemic and have proven to be affected more significantly. Charges for our jail services are down, and we expect them to stay down at least in part next year. This is a slight reduction from what we've seen in the past because we anticipate continuing to need to manage very carefully the number of inmates that we house in the jail at any given time. We expect lower revenue from our contract jail beds as a result. And so we've projected conservatively here for jail revenues. Likewise, charges for goods and services and for some of our licenses and permits, fines and penalties. These were all areas of revenue that we've seen a reduction in this year and expect to continue to see some effects from that from COVID-19 in 2021. Parks and Recreation is another one that we expect to be down. Intergovernmental revenues, that's kind of a strange one this year because of the very unusually large influx of federal revenue through the CARES Act for coronavirus relief funds. We had more than double the normal level of intergovernmental revenues coming into the city this year. This budget puts that back at a more historically normal level for funding of revenues. But overall, over the last 12 years, our revenues have increased just under 9%. And I'll remind council, a 9% increase in revenues while population was growing 15% and inflation was rising 21 to 25%. Our revenues have not kept up with those growth factors. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the effects we're seeing from that, you'll see that our revenues for 2021, we're currently projecting basically unchanged, which represents essentially an erosion against the normal growth patterns that you would see of at least 1% or 2% a year, but at least not severe. We're not at this point significantly expecting to have to lose revenue in the general fund in 2021. Let's see, I think that's it on my comments for revenue. So now we'll go on to expenditures. As I mentioned before, the general fund It's the largest single fund. It pays for nearly 45% of the city's overall activities. It carries the weight of most of our public safety activity, our transportation services, planning, parks, recreation, and all of our general government services, everything from council and the city clerk's office through all of our financial services, utility billing, courts, and I mentioned recreation. In some instances, it also supports one of our other some of our financially weaker funds. In this year, the primary fund benefiting from support from the general fund is the street fund. This has been the case for several years now. There's a little over $770,000 that is transferred out of the general fund to support the activities of the street fund. We'll get to that in a little more detail further down in the budget. But historically, the only other revenue source for the street fund has been the motor vehicle excise tax and gas tax, sales tax, and those are kind of weak right now. In the general fund, again, historically, we've had an increase in spending in the general fund between 2008 and this year of about 25% over the last 12 years, which is essentially keeping pace with the Washington state inflation rate. But there are a number of important trends and differences by functional category within that overall number. Public safety, for example, has tracked most closely with that overall trend, with inflation growing about 24% between 2008 and 2020, from about 5.8 million to 7.2 million last year. It'll be a little higher in the coming year, but that category of spending, which covers police and some of our fire services, has pretty much kept up with inflation. Transportation also grew over that time. This is repairs and maintenance and services on our roads, bridges, and other street infrastructure. That increased from about $900,000 in 2008 all the way up to 1.3 million. In a few years, it's been higher than that. Council will recall that there were some major projects funded through state and federal grants and other programs here a few years back. So in some years it's been higher, but that's about where we're at now. Over the last 12 years, spending in planning, parks, recreation has essentially remained flat. It's been kind of hovering along right at about between $900,000 and $1 million. So spending there has remained essentially the same. And then in the general government functions, which cover legislative and administrative, over the last 12 years, we actually reduced spending. The city cut positions and funding, reducing it from about 2.3 million in 2008 to about 1.8 million in general government for 2020. We'll go into a little more detail for what we're proposing in those areas for 2021. The total proposed budget is just over $13 million, which is just a slight increase over this year. Areas where funding is reduced, mentioned before, we're expecting a slow return to some of our parks and recreation activities. Facility rentals, those sorts of things. So we have slightly reduced the planned spending in that area to compensate. In most other areas, we're trying to return back to a more normal posture for spending. So public safety, our law and justice, planning, code enforcement, general government, all are seeing some increases over 2020. As shown there at the top, we did add an additional $250,000 to our ending fund balance, set that aside at the beginning of the budget process. And we're happy to say we also were able to restore funding in this budget. We are hopeful to be able to run a full pool season next year. So we've returned the funding levels that are necessary to fully staff the pool for the summer season. So we've got all that parked in there. total general fund spending this year is shown there is about 12.6 million. 2021, we're looking at about 13.2 million. That's an overall increase of about $500,000, but half of that is setting aside the additional $250,000 for your ending reserve target. If we're able to sustain that and keep to that ending fund balance reserve as proposed, that gets the city essentially halfway to the goal of a 1.9 million or $2 million ending fund reserve, that 60-day ending fund balance reserve that the state auditor's office recommends. So that's exciting to be able to get to that point this with this much uncertainty going on in the budget process and in the economy. I'll shift now to the other major funds. Let's see here, let's see where I'm going to start. So some of these are utilities, pretty straightforward. Their revenues and expenditures are a lot more straightforward than what you see in the general fund. They generally serve a single purpose or a singular, offer a singular service. Our water fund is what pays for the safe, clean drinking water that we have in Sunnyside. And it gets its revenue almost entirely from here, as you can see, a beginning fund balance that's very strong, but the actual charges that we bill out for our water utility each year, their overall budget is, their overall revenue, I should say, is approaching $4 million. It's one of our healthier funds. Next is sewer. Here again, basically three sources of revenue. It's beginning fund balance, the plan to charges for goods and services in the coming year, and then some interest payments that we have because of that, being able to have that money that is being saved. Next up is the ambulance fund. This is a little more diverse in its funding mix, and we start out with a pretty decent beginning balance. Next is charges for goods and services. These are the direct reimbursements that we get for ambulance services, as well as the GEMT funding. This is funding to help offset costs from, I believe, Medicare and Medicaid. Ken may be able to jump in on that. But this, some of this, as council's aware, is something that Chief Anderson identified and helped strengthen that slice here a couple of years ago by going after that GEMT reimbursement. And then there's the ambulance utility fee in our property tax and a little bit of interest. So the ambulance fund revenue stream has gotten more stable, and that's encouraging. That was one that was in the red for several years. Next down there, the garbage fund is mostly paid for out of charges for the garbage services. The street fund, this looks a little different this year, thanks to the voters of Sunnyside. Historically, this has been entirely paid for out of the intergovernmental revenues, the motor vehicle excise tax, gas taxes, and had to be heavily subsidized by an interfund transfer from the general fund. That interfund transfer and the MVET are still there for this year to pay for the street operations. But this year, for the first time, you're seeing the kind of labeled the TBD, or Transportation Benefit District. That's the effect of the 0.2% sales tax increase, which, based on the projected overall gross sales tax receipts for next year, is currently estimated to bring in about $430,000 next year. So we've added that in there, in working with state auditor and with MRSC. We're advised that because those are for essentially street projects, that when we receive those payments from the state for the TBD 0.2% revenue, we can receipt that directly into the street fund. We keep it accounted for separately there, and then we can transfer that out to projects as those projects are identified on the expenditure side. And you'll see that on the next slide with our first major street project under the TBD revenues, which is the Midvale Road reconstruction. And then lastly, the smallest of these, the stormwater utility, again, Same basic mix, some beginning fund balance that we carry forward, next year's charges for goods and services, and then some support intergovernmentally. On the expenditure side in these funds, I'll go kind of same order, the water fund, most of that goes to the standard operations for our water systems through the city. There is some debt service and interest payments based off of some past projects that are being paid off. And then there are some interfund transfers and project transfers to proposed projects to improve the water system infrastructure in 2021. Same story with the sewer fund. Most of the expenditures go to daily sewer operations, some debt service on past infrastructure investments, and then project transfers and interfund transfers for projects coming up in the coming year. Ambulance, that's a simpler one. It's almost all going straight into the operations of the transfer, of the service. Do want to call out, I should have mentioned this in water and sewer, among the interfund transfers for the first time this year in a long time are transfers to help start replenishing the funding for our equipment rental and replacement funds. We heard council's interest in that very clearly and are pleased to be able to start making some down payments on those investments into ER&R. In water and sewer, those show up in that green slice. In ambulance, we're doing a little bit out of there. That's the only interfund transfer coming out of there. And so I just wanted to call that to council's attention. Garbage, 100% of that. The revenue comes in as shown on the previous slide, and then all of it goes out to just pay for the garbage services contract. Street fund, most of that is operations. Here again, we're showing a very small slice, kind of starting to make that down payment into the ER&R. And then this is where we show you that interfund transfer out to fund the match that will be required to provide for the Midvale project from the Transportation Benefit District revenues. Next year, that match is $234,690. The balance of the TBD revenues will be reserved in their fund and used for matches for the upcoming projects that we have outlined in our 6-year transportation improvement program. And like garbage, 100% of the expenditures in stormwater are going to operations this year. All right. This slide just kind of summarizes what this means in terms of staffing. As in last year's budget, the preliminary 2021 budget has no staff layoffs, where despite the economic uncertainties, we do not foresee a need to entertain any layoffs. In addition, we were able to look at the funding stability of the ambulance fund and what we had in the general fund. And we know one of council's top priorities was to move forward with creating another firefighter position. And so we do have that included in this proposed budget. As we did last year, there were 2 vacant positions. You'll see those again in the enhancement request. There were 2 vacant positions in the police department that were left unfunded, but they're still, they're established approved positions by council, but they are unfunded at this time. They were unfunded for 2020. And we're proposing to leave them unfunded again until our financial can improve further and council can consider restoring funding for those. Out of the enterprise and restricted funds, the only personnel proposal in this year's budget is the ambulance utility share of that firefighter EMS position. And I'll just note for council's reference, this preliminary budget already reflects all of the approved collective bargaining agreement raises that were approved in the CBAs last year. We have 2 bargaining agreements still in negotiation with Teamsters for Public Works and for Clerical. For planning purposes only, we have assumed a 2% increase in compensation and benefits for the other representative employees, just so that we kind of had some cushion built into the budget depending on the outcome of those negotiations. And then now I'll turn to just a review of the enhancement requests that were entertained by council at your workshops earlier this year. Obviously, with tight financial circumstances, we were not able to find a way to fund all of the requests, but we were able to fund essentially the top 4 priority requests that council members had identified. And so you'll see these highlighted in the information ahead. We do, and I'll just kind of go through those real quick. On this page, you'll see these are just sorted alphabetically. They're not in priority order, but just alphabetically. But you'll see on this page, one of the council's top priorities had been to go ahead with some security improvements here at City Hall, to look at the approaches to City Hall and the Veterans Plaza. We do have that included in this proposal. On the next page, you'll see the firefighter position, again, that council had identified. And you'll see the first instance where we are trying to put some down payment in on replenishing our equipment rental and replacement funds. We have actually a strategy here on the general fund. While we're only able to put aside about $60,000 this year, Finance Director Alba had identified that we actually have some interfund loans that will be paid off out of the general fund in the next 2 budget years, 22 and in 21 and 22. That will free up further expenditure capacity in future years. And depending on our financial position, we are encouraging council to consider redirecting those existing commitments when those are paid off to increase the amount of funding that we're diverting into the ER&R funds from the general fund. And then next, I think this is the last one out of the general fund. I think the 4th item on the council's list was, we know it's going to take some time to was the police vehicles, to lease some police vehicles. We know it's going to take some time to build up our ER&R fund to be able to fully fund replacement of our vehicle fleets. But we do feel that there are, and understand, council had shared, there's some urgency around getting some replacement police vehicles sooner, so that we can make some headway. We see this as a bridging strategy to lease vehicles while we're building up the reserves to be able to buy and manage our vehicles. And so we were able to include some funding in this year's proposal to enable the police department to make some progress on that effort. And then now turning to proposals funded in the other enterprise funds, you'll see here in the street fund that we carved out, again, a small amount. Street fund's not one of our healthiest funds, but we did try to carve out a little bit from there to fund for ER&R for their future vehicle and equipment replacement. The public safety fund, this was a proposal from 2020 to create a patrol position funded out of the public safety fund. We did not include that in this budget. Tourism fund, similarly, there was a proposal to fund part of that last year, not included in this budget. In the water fund, and Public Works Director Fisher is on the line too if there are questions later on this. We are proposing a number of infrastructure improvement projects to be paid for out of the water fund. First off is, again, trying to make some investment in replenishing our equipment rental and replacement funding for future equipment needs. The SCADA server, this is our primary data telemetry system for monitoring the quality and health and conditions of our water system. The server that supports that important system is 7 years old, and the replacement for it is proposed to be included in next year's budget. Base station smart points, council's aware that the water department has been working on a program for several years, a number of years now, to convert our base station our meter reading system to a base station that allows quick electronic reading of water usage. And so we've been each year taking a portion of these smart points, installing them and replacing them, and making progress on that. Franklin Court water main improvements. This was an interesting project. Came to our attention this year when a homeowner in that area brought low water pressure to our attention. And it turned out, for whatever reason, when those 11 homes were put in decades ago, they were only given a 2-inch water main. That's like slightly larger than your garden hose. Obviously, that is not adequate to serve 11 homes. And so Public Works Director Fisher worked with our engineering firm, and we'd like to move forward with a project to serve those customers to a much better standard. Communications upgrades. This is a smaller project just to improve the communication at our wells, a number of our wells, by installing new cellular modems. And then the next couple are, again, smaller well upgrade projects. And some of that lingo I'm going to let Shane explain if you have questions. And then we get to sewer. This is one of the funds that is healthiest, but it's also got quite a bit of expensive infrastructure. So we are, vehicle and equipment infrastructure. So we are diverting some money into the ER&R fund for them. We are proposing some lift station upgrades, and council's seen a couple of projects already this year with sewer pipelining, where we're able to rehabilitate aging sewer infrastructure in place by going in with a relining of the pipes, and that's proven very successful. And so we want to kind of have a placeholder for potential projects in that arena next year. In the ambulance fund, we've already discussed both of these proposals that are included in the budget, the ER&R and the fire position. And that's that. Next steps for council and for the public, we have our first public hearing on the preliminary budget on November 9th. Final hearing on November 23rd, right before Thanksgiving. There's a council workshop on December 7th, and currently council is scheduled to adopt a final budget for 2021 on December 14th that will take effect January 1st. And with that, the department heads are happy to answer any questions, and I will stop sharing my screen.
All right, Mr. Manager, thank you for that update. It's very informative, a lot of good information in there. We'll go through our list of council members to see if there's any questions or comments on your preliminary budget. And we'll start with our councilor, Restucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to thank staff and the city manager for the work that they did on this budget. I know it was difficult with your finance director being laid up at home, so I really appreciate the time that you've taken to produce such a great product. And it is a great product. This is probably one of the most comprehensive budgets I've seen in my 17 years on council. So I truly appreciate the work that was done here. Also, I appreciate the fact that even though we couldn't fund these items, we captured all the items that council had requests for, and that we're keeping track of that information so that it can be included on future budgets. So thank you, sir. I'm sure I'll have other questions, but I'll probably contact you outside council.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Strumler.
I don't have any questions. Good work on the budget, but I got no questions at this time. By the time we got to the end, the ones I did have were answered. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Henry. Okay, I'll come back to Councilor Henry. Councilor Farmer. Council, I think you're muted, Councilor Farmer, if you're trying to say something. Okay, I'll come back to Councilor Farmer. Up next, Councilor Hicks.
Yeah, I'd just like to tag in with the councilors there. They did a great job on this. No questions, comments.
Councilor Broersma?
Yes, I would like to echo my colleagues' words. I'm very impressed with the work that staff has done. All of you did an excellent job keeping this budget balanced without laying anybody off, without raising any taxes. I'm extremely pleased with what I see. Keep up the good work. Like I said, I'm very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll try again. Councilor Henry? Okay, Councilor Farmer?
At this particular point, I have no questions. I probably will have some later, but I guess that's all I got.
Okay, and just myself, I really appreciate that Councilor Rasucci said, obviously it's a lot of work to get this budget balanced, a lot of moving parts, and obviously having to rely a little bit more on staff that's available. I know we wish our finance director well. Hopefully she gets well soon, and when she comes back, I think she'll be happy with all the work you guys have done. So we appreciate all the extra hours and research that had to be done to get this budget and balance and in place. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. We'll pass that along.
Okay, so up next in our agenda, we have upcoming council meetings. Mr. City Manager.
All right. Well, no surprise. Essentially, the next several meetings are mostly focused on budget activity. I'm working with our finance supervisor, Delilah Sines, on budget amendment number 4. We're tentatively aiming to have that ready for you on the 9th. It may bump to the 23rd. Some of what we're waiting in on is as we're going out with the expenditures related to the COVID grant program. Those will start flowing soon. YCDA has completed its scoring and evaluation of the applicants for the small business assistance grants. So we've got a little variable there that may bump to the 9th. We'll have the preliminary budget hearing next week. We'll be bringing forward the garbage rate increase. Council's probably aware back in, I think, 2015, Council entered into an agreement which had fixed preset kind of rate increases over time in garbage services. Again, I'm working with the finance supervisor to bring that information. Finance Director Alba had begun work on both of those, the budget amendment and the rate increase, before she was injured. So hope to have those ready. And then lastly, we've talked before, the Public Works Director has been pursuing information on a potential use of the MRSC Small Works roster as a tool. We maintain currently a Small Works roster. It's limited in scope and takes time and effort to maintain. MRSC maintains a very robust roster, but there's the process that we would have to go through if we want to sign up with that. So we've got that coming up next Monday. Then right before Thanksgiving, we have the second budget hearing. Our clerk is currently conducting or getting ready to conduct the solicitation for our 2021 official newspaper. And then Chief Anderson is in conversations with Yakima regarding a potential updated mutual aid agreement. At this point, we've left the December 7th workshop open for topics that may come up if we need extra effort or time around the budget. And then the December 14th meeting to finalize everything. We may have a few little items creep on there. We're checking to make sure we've got all of our contracts in place and renewed, but some of those may be coming up, but that's basically it for the end of the year. Oh, and Mayor, you are muted. There you go.
Yes, thank you. I just realized that. Appreciate it. Thank you for that update on the agenda coming up items. And that's the last item on our agenda for today. So unless I hear an objection from council, this meeting is adjourned at 8:15 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr.
Night.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Everyone, good night.
Night.
Thank you all.